Welcome to the Rude Dog Show, everybody. Good evening. And for those maybe later than you wanted to be, it is now 8 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard and 5 o'clock here in the Central Valley, California. Me and the gentleman here to my right, his name is Kirk McKnight, who was kind of in locale to the Super Bowl Media Week down in Phoenix, the surrounding area. But I wanted to let you know, everybody should know this by now. If you haven't noticed, you should look at social media or maybe listen to one of my shows. Imagine that. I have plenty of those going on. I do have a brand new sponsor called Mini Saturdays, SatursdaysCount.com. It's probably the greatest tagline you're going to find in college football today. Now, think about this. Put your cap on, if you will. One season, 12 games, 12 Saturdays in those games. You can't win the Natty if you don't make them count. Go to SatursdaysCount.com. Again, SatursdaysCount.com and go get your shirt. Whether it's a team you root for or a team you went to college or you just like the colors of shirts that are different in your closet hanging up or not. Anyway, there's plenty of colors. Speaking of colors, Kirk has a wonderful array of die-cast metal cars that seem to be all multicolored, including the packaging on the wall. That I have never seen before. Cars on a wall. Usually they're on the street, but in this case, they're die-cast. Welcome, Kirk McKnight, to the show. Kirk, hi, man. How are you?
I'm good. You have no idea how many little kids come into this office wanting to rip these off the wall and take the cars out of them and go play with them. That's the discipline. So you don't let them.
Yeah, well, kids that aren't old enough to drive vehicles should have no business taking the cars out of the packaging and go play with them on the floor. So, for those that have kids, probably should know that, and if they don't, shame on you. You should tell your kids not to play with collectible cars or anything else that's collectible. We wanted I wanted to dive into something a little bit different. I've been talking NBA, talking NFL. I've been doing this for about 9 years. But one thing stays constant for me, and that is remembering all of the wonderful broadcasters from Carey on through. I mean, the list is completely exponential. I can't even name every single memorable broadcaster. John Madden makes me think of why I wanted to get in the business to begin with, and then um, you have the lates and you have the greats and the ones that really stand out in your mind. Uh, Kirk's got a book out, and if you don't know, it's published by Roman and Littlefield. It's called The Voices of Baseball. The game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime. And I have to ask you, Kirk, what made you want to write a book, and what was the forethought in regards to what this book was going to mean to everyone else out there who had a chance to nab themselves a copy?
Well, the initial theme of the book was to basically talk about how all the ballparks are different. Baseball is the only sport anymore where not every ballpark is uniform and every playing dimension is uniform like that. It's a very universal theme, and so ballparks is the same anymore. And that is one sport that is the only sport that can herald that uh, title. And so I thought, okay, what if what if I have a book where we discuss the differences in ballparks, the quirks, the temperature, the weather, the climate, the way the ball plays, the dimensions, the walls, everything. And then I thought, well, if I sit here and talk about it, it's going to be the boring thing ever. And so I thought, well, what about the broadcasters? They've been around for longer than anybody. So that was the angle, and I pitched that angle to agents, and they started picking up on it. And then I started talking to the broadcasters, and soon it became getting an agent and then getting a publishing deal. So it's a unique tour through ballparks, but it also really touches on the broadcasting moment. The book is now being re-released, and yes, it still talks about these ballparks and how they're different from each other. But really, when you have these 50 broadcasters, you start just, I want the stories, I want the meat of it all, I want what you're going through in these moments, so that each market can have a little piece of this book. the book is not just for Yankee fans, for Dodger fans, or for Red Sox fans. Yeah, they're very popular in the book. This book is for all 30 teams and all their fans. They're the magical moment, at least in every team, that's shared in this book. And the uniqueness of each ballpark of each team is shared in this book.
Well, we're having a little bit of a technical issue on the side and the Aaron side of what you had said, but to encapsulate that, I don't know if you want to come back in with the same link I sent over to you, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and re-log in to it, we can go on. But the gist of this is essentially that there are average players, there are average broadcasters, there are guys who have done everything possible with short of playing the game. We're talking to broadcasters, talking about the ones who have found a way to make their mark in sports history. And I think more importantly, everybody remembers opening days in baseball. Everybody does remember a lot of the no hitters, the ones who have uh, made a mark in your memory banks, your family's memory banks. So the conversations that you have in vehicles on your way home from a game, whether you lost or a game that you won, it's still very significant in that you remember the sound of that voice. You remember the tone of that voice. You remember the heightened vocality whenever there was maybe a grand slam. Maybe there was something that had everything to do with the memorable times at every game you went to. I remember I had went to a Pittsburgh Steelers game down in then San Diego, and it was very interesting because the players themselves were really I don't want to say disenchanted, but I think the players were a lot more disenchanted in regards to um, what they were sensing, what they were feeling, how they were going about the game, and the overall sense was is that from the fans' perspective, a lot of these guys are so worried about whether or not they're going to play. The fans themselves were relatively fickle because they didn't know if they were coming or going, or if there was a team to really root for. And California teams in baseball, just like it is in the NFL, are very fickle. Down here in Los Angeles, down in LA, rather, you have the Chargers sharing the very same stadium that the LA Rams, one AFC, one NFC team, and so these players, these guys, these entities are really kind of struggling to find out what the overall issue is. Are they going to be a fan? Or are they not going to be a fan? We have Kirk back now.
I'm trying it from the computer now instead of the iPad, so hopefully it works.
No problem at all. It sounds pretty good to me. I was just referring to how players are so fickle in certain places. I was using LA as a good example of that in Southern California, but they'll always remember the person that called the play, the announcement they heard over the PA. Maybe they're listening from their car. Nowadays, apps are in control of what the sounds that we get from these broadcasters who are now streaming on another medium. But nothing beats being in a stadium, whether you're watching baseball, whether you're watching the NFL, or maybe a match, playing tennis, right? I've never been to a tennis game, so I really don't know what that's like. But from the end perspective of being the one on the couch, I remember Serena's Last Dance. I remember that game very explicitly. A game, it's a game, it's a match, same difference. What did you take away from all the moments that you had experienced that helped you create this book? And what do you expect people to actually get from reading it?
Well, I mean, I think the broadcasters are the best part of telling the story. Uh, in a literary form, they definitely do the best part of telling the story because sometimes when you get a good broadcaster, they're telling you the story as it's happening. But when these moments are happening, some of the better broadcasters know that they are not going to be able to top the sound around them. Vince Scully was a perfect example of that. As there's no way you're going to fight these 50,000 people behind you. The booth is shaking. It's like an earthquake. What are you going to do that is going to drown that out? So the good broadcasters and the better broadcasters, or just maybe even the ones who just realize the futility of trying to fight the crowd, will let the crowd tell the story. I mean, there's so many different aspects of that in the book where the broadcasters just let them tell the story. And then now in literary form, they can sit there and really tell you the story and tell you all the things that were happening around.
Oddly enough, you mentioned Vince Scully, and may he rest in peace. And of course, with the loss of his wife prior to that, certainly seemed to not really. It changed a lot of things, but what you'll never separate is it's time for Dodgers baseball. It will never change. That will always be the resonant factor for those that grew up listening to a man like Vince Scully, who did it for so long, and he did it with such passion and fervor and excitement and accuracy and such baseball diplomacy that he would never give the Dodgers an unequal edge. But what he did give them and the fans was the reality of what the game was like, game by game, play after play, night after night, whether it was a 3-game skid or if they were on the road. One of those things that you can always tell a story to. You can always acclimate yourself to what you remember the most growing up, regardless of the sport that you watched. And I think this book is a pretty good example, if not one of the better examples that I've seen within recent memory, that really kind of tells the story, I mean, of not only the players who play the game, but more importantly, the broadcasters who are going to tell the tale of the tape, if you will. We know that Al Bernstein, a connection of mine on social media who covers boxing, has been doing that for a decade. One of the best to ever do it ringside. Still doing it to this day, ringside. And he knows so much about the sport that he's encapsulated people's minds and their ability to be creative based on the words that he says and the way that he says and the way that he phrases them. What can anybody take away from not only the book overall, but what can they take away from each individual broadcaster, in your opinion, based on what the book outlines that could give someone maybe an idea of hope if they were to try to choose a career?
Well, the Vin Scully chapter at the very end, kind of the tribute chapter, seeing as how I'm speaking out to Central California, funny story about that is if you are in Southern California and you're wanting to be a broadcaster when you grow up, you might want to try changing venues because you get to the age of retirement and that spot will still be filled. When you think of Chick Hearn, Bob Miller, and Vin Scully, those are the three big names as far as those three sports. Hockey with Bob Miller and the Kings, Chick Hearn obviously with the Lakers, and Vin Scully. And they kidded about it. They said, some kid who would listen to us for the very first time is like, I want to be a broadcaster. And well, now they're 65 and Vin Scully's been broadcasting 67 years. So good luck. But I will address this to the Dodger crowd out there. This is a very poignant part of the chapter. Charlie Steiner was about 6 or 7 years old back in New York when the Dodgers were still in Brooklyn and Johnny Padres beat the Yankees, and Vin Scully was on that call when they won that World Series, and Steiner caught the bug. He's 6 years old and basically he goes through life until 2020. And now he finally has the chance to call Dodgers World Series championship. And guess what? He was doing it from his living room, the same place that he would be sitting there, or not the same place, but as a kid back in I think it was in Brooklyn. He would be sitting there in front of the radio and calling the game as it went along. And in 2020, the Dodgers have beaten the Rays, and Charlie is calling the game live on the air from his living room. So it was basically a full circle kind of fill. And it was a 65-year trip to do it. And I was so happy for him. And I was so happy that he was able to, be on that call for the Dodgers, considering that journey that actually, years and years went by we all know Charlie from ESPN, his years and doing that, and even broadcasting with the Yankees for however many years, and then he gets this opportunity to broadcast with Vince Scully for years, and then take over the lead. And so, I mean, you think about that, and you think about what you're asking me. Those moments are out there. Those moments for anybody who aspires to be a broadcaster are out there. You just got to hang on to them. He obviously had to hang on to it for about 50 years before he actually joined the Dodgers broadcast booth, and then another 8 or 10 before he called a World Series championship. So as long as you have the patience and the longevity, you can do anything you want to do. There's so many examples in my hockey book as well of people who grew up wanting to broadcast for their home team that do and actually call a World Series championship or a Stanley Cup championship. And I mean, is there anything better than that?
I can't think of anything, to be honest with you. And I say that wholeheartedly because I growing up, I can use my own personal experiences. Growing up, I was part of a singing family. Every holiday season, we were there. We hold the microphones. I sing the indicative Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. My first name is Rudy, so it was almost as if it was default, and I'm the one who got passed the mic. And it was very interesting that, fast forward probably a better part of 20 years, my late aunt had passed away from ovarian cancer, and one of the last things that she told me was, "You're going to find your voice. Don't stop. You will find your voice." And then when I finally did, I immediately retorted back to that. I almost converted back to that very moment mentally and emotionally and where I was as a young man. And I thought to myself, wow, now I know what she actually was talking about. Now I know what she meant. And here I am at the ripe age of 40 years old saying, you know what, I'm going to get into broadcasting. I want to do play by play. I want to, discuss and talk to players. And it's just kind of opened the floodgates into a completely different thing. Now, if I never do that, that's perfectly okay. I'm good with that. But I know that we all have opportunities that are presented to us. And sometimes they come in the very unlikely circumstances. Vince Scully passing away untimely, may he rest in peace, now opens up a door for someone else to come in. Same thing in radio broadcasting, same exact thing. And I've picked the brains of many different program directors. One told me I was too old. The other one told me that no one's ever going to want to see me on TV because I'm old. And I just thought to myself, that just can't be. That just can't be. And I think a lot of people can learn a lot from reading this book. Those who are aspiring and those that may actually have been in the game for quite some time, or perhaps maybe those who have played the game and decided to convert that passion that they exhibited on the field, track, golf landscape, whatever it might be, and pick up a 9-iron or maybe drop that 9-iron and get into a broadcast type of situation. I know that I had interviewed the famous 85 Bears head coach, Dick Butkus, who didn't want to speak anything about broadcasting. His notion of broadcasting was tomfoolery, he said. And then he asked me if I was baiting him in a conversation, and obviously he was playing a 9-round. He was on the golf course, so he didn't really want to go in. He didn't really want to talk about it. But I thanked him for his time nonetheless. It was great to speak to him, and it's almost as if I pictured him with a cigar in his mouth, which wouldn't surprise me that he actually had one while I was talking to him. But needless to say, this book has so much dialogue, so much in-depth uh, conversations and surround that context. And for anybody who wants to check this link out, I'll have it posted on TheRudeDogShow.com. I'll even post it on Twitter for that matter. You got to get a copy of this book, but you have to use this code. And I'm going to give you the phonetic spell out of those that may not know. It's Rudy, Larry, Fan, Apple, Nancy, David, Frank 30. So that's RLFANDF 30, which I'm sure is Roman and Littlefield. 30, just at a quick glance, if you will. And it's actually a really good book. It has a lot of deeper seated meanings. It may apply to you, it may apply to your aspirations, it may apply to what you're trying to accomplish in your broadcasting career. But moreover, I think it's just being a fan of sport in general that will allow for you to really appreciate this book, and not only to appreciate that book, but to maybe keep it as a part of your collection and read it from time to time to maybe give you some inspiration when all you hear is no's and maybe not enough yeses. Lord knows that everybody goes through that, including yours truly. Everybody can find this. We're live on California Today, live on that's right, Canada. That's right, Canada, eh? And live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. This is where we're at. Kirk McKnight joins me here on the Rude Dog Show for a little while longer. Um, what is the first game you remember going to, and what was the most memorable part about that game?
I think I think the one that I choose to be the first one I remember is when I went. See, my favorite player growing up was Del Murphy, and when he played for the Braves, of course, I would watch him on TBS. In fact, I self-published a little argument for Del Murphy's case for the Hall of Fame. So as a little kid, I watched Del Murphy every day, and so the closest I could get, this was before interleague play, so the closest I could get to watching Del Murphy live, this was before the Diamondbacks were around, this was before the Rockies were around, would be Dodger Stadium from Las Vegas. Of course, San Diego's just down the road a little bit, but Dodger Stadium is the closest. And I went to Dodger Stadium to watch the Braves and watch Del Murphy. And this was kind of later in Del Murphy's career, necessarily almost the end of his tenure with Atlanta. And they pulled him out of the game around the sixth inning. And I think I was about 8 or 9, maybe 10. I was like a manager storming up and down my aisle, just upset, just throwing my arms out, just like, why, why did you take out Del Murphy? You're 10 years old. You don't realize that the manager is taking him out probably for a pinch runner or for some kind of defensive substitution. I didn't care about any of that. Why? We came from 250 miles from Las Vegas to watch a guy play that I've been watching on TV and finally get to see in real life, and you're taking him out of the game. It's just that, and so that's the one I stick to. I'd been to Angels games even before that, and Padres games down at the old Jack Murphy Stadium before that, but I don't really have a clear memory of any of that. But I do have a memory of me storming up and down my aisle like an angry Bobby Cox, if you will.
Yeah, that wow. I think every skipper, if you will, of course, that only applies to baseball and not someone who's going to send you on a 3 hour tour and get lost in the ocean. I think that I would say mine would have to be when the Steelers were visiting San Diego. I made mention of it earlier in the show. Le'Veon Bell and the Steelers were marching to the end zone, and at the last possible second, you'll find that video on my YouTube channel. And it shows me jerking the camera up, but Le'Veon Bell getting into the end zone. Just in case anybody forgot that part, he did get into the end zone. He muscled in with the help of the offensive line for the Steelers, which, again, to a very fickle San Diego market, the Steelers won and beat the then San Diego Chargers. So I remember that very, very explicitly. Lots of TV memories of watching my team play, interceptions, the tiny toe, tap against Arizona Cardinals and Super Bowl 43, Heinz Ward traveling in the end zone, defeating the Seahawks, Super Bowl 40, there's just so many memories, but live memories are a little bit different. Those resonate a little bit differently than watching them on TV, in my opinion, only because I've watched so many sports. It's not even funny. But what will probably always stand out to me, probably one of the most somber days in sports history, is when we lost the late great Kobe Bean Bryant for the Los Angeles Lakers. That made my day stand still forever. in the sports lore. Matter of fact, every time I watch the Lakers, I think that Kobe's sitting on a sideline with Gianna. And in spirit, that's probably the case, to be quite honest with you. But it's just something that really helped sports kind of stand still for those that had watched it and recognized it. At the time, I was working at iHeart in Denver, Colorado. So I remember that very explicitly. And I just could not believe what I was hearing, could not believe what I was seeing. Of course, I couldn't have a podcast on it because I'm at work, and my job didn't require me to talk sports during a weather and traffic update. So I had to kind of switch gears a little bit. But Kirk, thank you so much. It's been fabulous. Again, I'm going to post this link along with the code for 30% off. I will post that all over my social media and let people kind of get a taste of this absolutely fantastic book. And moreover, speaking of Al Bernstein, we were just going back and forth on social media about these draft picks, and who's going to be picked first between Mark Robinson, who should technically be the number one overall pick, in my opinion, but running backs predominantly don't get that kind of love. So we'll leave it at that. Kirk, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Give other places to the listeners or viewers where they can find this wonderful book.
I mean, you can always find it on Amazon if you don't feel comfortable enough getting onto the publisher's website and just have a standby with Amazon. You can always get it there. BarnesandNoble.com will have it. Anywhere books are sold online, you should be able to find the book. So you should be no problem. Definitely Amazon. I know you can pre-order it there, but like he mentioned, get that use that discount, use that code, and you'll save $11 over what you would be spending at Amazon. So
$11 will do a lot of great things. Get you
it
some
does.
gas,
Get
maybe a
you an extra
trip
value meal.
through McDonald's. If your kids are hungry, get a Happy Meal, and everybody's happy. Uh, Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. This will be posted on TheRudeDogShow.com. Check it out. It's definitely worth picking up, taking a look at. And Kirk, where else are you located in regards to social media, or are you?
I mean, you can find me on Twitter at the Voices of MLB. MLB is all in caps. Facebook has a page for the Voices of Baseball. If you want to join or like that group, I'll be posting anything on Facebook under the Voices of Baseball, closer to it, sharing links, sharing stories, I guess, on the feed. Just some quotes from the book. I do that every once in a while, just so you can kind of have a little bit of a hint or preview of what you can find in the book from which broadcaster.
Everybody loves sneak peeks. I know I do, especially for movie trailers. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Hey, thank you so much. We appreciate it, Kirk. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Absolutely. My pleasure. It's great to have guys like this on the show, because what it does is it really showcases what they're capable of doing. Um, uh, what memories you'll always have close, near, and dear to your heart that you either loved or you had serious disdain for, did not like it at all whatsoever. But it's always good to mix and match. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show, to be posted on Apple Podcasts. It is live on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, you name it. I'm on it. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you soon. Have a good night.